The midterms in the United States are underway. U.S. President Joe Biden has said democracy itself is on the ballot. Democrats are hoping to keep control of the House of Representatives and the Senate. But barring George Bush Jr., presidents since Bush Sr. have lost control of the House during midterms. Biden and other Democratic campaigners, such as former President Barack Obama, insist these polls are a fight for democracy. Opinion polls expect Democrats to hold on to the Senate, where 35 seats are being contested, but pollsters also say the Democrats will lose the House by about 40 seats. All 435 House seats are up for grabs in these elections. Losing control of the House of Representatives will affect Biden's ability to go forward with his agenda. A Republican-controlled House will most likely not pass laws that Biden wants to push through. However, he could still use executive orders to move forward with his plans, but executive orders are easier to undo than laws. A poor showing in the midterms could also discourage Biden from running for president again in 2024. On the eve of the elections, Biden campaigned in the state of Maryland.
You got one day until one of the most important elections. You've heard this time and again. I almost feel guilty repeating it. Our lifetimes are going to be shaped by what happens the next year to 3 years. It's going to shape what the next couple decades look like.
Conversely, a solid display from Republicans during the polls will give a boost to former President Donald Trump. Many Republican candidates have been endorsed by the former president. They have backed Trump's allegations that the 2020 elections were stolen, this despite there being no evidence of widespread voter fraud. While campaigning, Trump teased that he would run again in 2024. He said the following during the rally in Ohio on Monday.
This is the year we're going to take back the House, we're going to take back the Senate, and we're going to take back America. And in 2024, most importantly, we are going to take back our magnificent White House. I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th, at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
His announcement would come after the midterm results are expected to have been finalized. The results may pave the way for Donald Trump's return to the White House. Meanwhile, billionaire Tesla CEO and Twitter owner Elon Musk has asked people to vote for Republicans. He has pinned the tweet you're seeing on your screens. Musk qualified his recommendation by saying shared power curbs the worst excesses of both parties. His appeal was aimed at independent voters. The independent voter turnout is expected to be the deciding factor during these midterms. Voter turnout in the US has been close to 60% for presidential elections in recent decades. It's been around 45% during midterms. Voter turnout has increased in the elections since Donald Trump won the presidency. Reports have linked higher turnouts in the last few years to Democrats performing better. The turnout is expected to be high for these midterms as well. All right, and for more on this story, we're now joined by WION correspondent Susan Teherani from New York and Voice of America correspondent Jessica Stone, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much to the two of you for joining me. We are in fact also joined at this point by Daniel L. Davis from Virginia. He's a foreign policy expert and a military expert for defense priorities. We will go across to him in just a moment, but before that, let's get a word in from the reporters on the show. Susan, if I could begin with you. Now, there are plenty of issues that these midterm elections have been fought on: jobs, inflation, the state of the economy, abortion rights, gun control, immigration, U.S. aid to Ukraine, and the Democrats saying democracy itself is at stake. But would it be correct to say that these polls are indeed a referendum on the Biden presidency, and if the Republicans take control of the Congress, it could completely derail Biden's agenda and provide a major shot in the arm to the Republicans ahead of the 2024 presidential race?
Yeah, that's an absolutely valid point. It is a referendum on the Biden presidency, despite what the president himself says. And by the way, we constantly hear that democracy is on the ballot. Well, the ballot is democracy. The fact that Americans are going to the polls in great numbers in these midterm elections, really record-breaking, indicates that these elections are extremely important to them. And on top of voters' concern, and this is something that Democratic strategists in these final days have admitted, that priority for American voters, Democrat, Republican, independents from all walks of life, has been the economy, inflation, and in a lot of places, like where I am in New York, crime really topping the agenda. One note on the issue of abortion, it has really been talked about a lot, and that has been a Democratic talking point. Many say that the Democrats shouldn't have put their eggs all in one basket. That's absolutely correct. We're seeing that in the polls right now. But there's another issue, and that's the fact that perhaps if abortion wasn't on the ballot for the Democrats, while we don't know the results right now, they would probably lose even more seats after the polls close.
Well, that is a very, very significant thing that you are saying, something that will be a source of big worry for women across the United States. You're saying it's not just democracy, but abortion itself, which is on the ballot for the Democrats. Jessica, let me come to you. Could it be days before we know the final outcome of these elections and who's going to be in charge of the Congress? The race for Senate seats in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia and Pennsylvania is quite tight. Also, if you could explain to our viewers what red mirage states and blue mirage states actually mean and why this phenomenon is crucial once counting of votes begins.
Well, the answer all begins with political polarization, and we've talked a lot on this broadcast about how polarized American voters are. They are so polarized that they actually vote in different ways, not just for different parties, but in different ways altogether. And what that means is that we see in the polling data from the 40 million early votes that most of them are Democrats. And that leads us to believe that more Republicans will vote on the actual election day. Well, that means that the votes by Republicans will be counted differently than Democrats. Not counted at all, but just at different times, because it takes longer to get a mail-in ballot, open it up. Sometimes some states aren't allowed to start opening them up and counting them before Election Day. Other states start at 7 a.m. on Election Day. So there's a difference in when we see the results of those votes. And what that can lead to, as it did in 2020, is what's called a red mirage, because we got more Republican votes in on election night for the presidential election early in the evening than we did Democratic votes, which came at the end of the evening. And so President Trump at the time used that to justify claims of election fraud, of election rigging, saying that, oh, we were winning at the beginning of the night, we're no longer winning, when in fact what was happening there was that votes were just simply being counted as they were supposed to be counted according to those states' laws. So we will see an impact, most likely. Gallup is already tracking the kinds of votes that have been made and who's making them, and they are suggesting that we should be prepared tonight for another red mirage. That is to say, we will likely see more Republican votes come in earlier in the evening and then Democratic votes later in the evening, or even into tomorrow or the next day, because remember, mail-in voting is popular this year, and that takes longer to count, which leads us to believe that we may not have a result tonight or tomorrow. It may take into Wednesday evening or into Thursday morning for us to get a count, especially in a close state like Pennsylvania, where we know there are a lot of mail-in votes. That is a neck-and-neck race, and that race could give us the decision on who controls the Senate, which is a very important piece of the election that we're following.
All right, this is very interesting. If there are indications that there is a wave of support for Republicans early on in the counting process, then we could very well see very early declarations of victory by the Republicans, and therefore we could in fact end up waiting for at least the next 2 to 3 days before we know the final results. Let's certainly hope this doesn't lead to chaos. Stay on with us, Jessica and Susan. We will come back to you in a moment and expand on some other important aspects of this election in just a moment. But now let's go across to Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, who joins us from Virginia. As we said, he's a foreign policy expert and a military expert for defense priorities. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, let me begin by asking you, the stakes could not have been higher. We've seen 3 US presidents campaign in these elections: Biden, Obama and Trump. Now, in the House of Representatives, the Republican Party needs 5 seats to assume control, while in the Senate, all the GOP needs is to gain 1 seat to be in the driver's seat and pose a humongous challenge to President Biden. Add to that Biden's plummeting popularity ratings. Do you believe that if the Republicans were to actually take control of both chambers of the Congress, President Biden could in fact be reduced to being a lame duck president for the next 2 years? How worried do you think the Democrats are at this point?
Well, I certainly think that they're very worried, and I won't go so far as to say a lame duck presidency, because I think, as you mentioned in the early part of this segment here, this is common that the White House the party, the White House, will lose in the midterm elections after they have taken power. That's happened to both Republicans and Democrats. And part of the issue is that it's not like the Republicans are a monolithic entity that they'll always vote together as a bloc. There's always defections here and there, as is the case with the Democratic Party. So it's not going to be an automatic everything's against the president. He'll have to do a lot more diplomacy. He'll have to use diplomacy and politics and how he gets things done, how he works with people, etc. But there's no question that the net result is going to be he's going to have a much harder time to get his agenda passed. And it's just very clear he won't accomplish as much. And as you said, also, this is all setting the stage for the 2024 presidential elections.
Well, that is the big question on everyone's mind. Even if he's not reduced to being a lame duck president, is he going to find it increasingly difficult to function? And could it also, in fact, impact Biden's own decision about whether to rerun for presidency in 2024? Now, if the Republicans win the midterms and gain control of the Congress, would it be correct to say, as you just pointed out, that it will set the stage for Donald Trump's 3rd White House bid? And will it give him and the GOP a distinct advantage in 2024, even though those presidential elections are still 2 years away?
Oh, well, I don't think there's any question that it will. I mean, certainly as opposed to the Democrats winning the House back, which would have been, very almost unprecedented. But the fact that what's going to really depend on is how big of an advantage the Republicans get. As you pointed out, they only need 5 seats. But, is it going to be 20 seats? Is it going to be 40 seats? How big is the advantage? Because the bigger the range by which the Republicans win the House, then that's going to, throw even more weight onto the Republican side. And to your original question there about whether President Biden will rerun in 24, I'm not sure that the outcome is going to have anything to do with whether he runs or not. My personal opinion is that he probably won't, just because I think it's just taken so much of a toll on him in this first term. And I just don't know that he has enough stamina left to run for a second term. And I think it's going to take all he can to finish out the 2 years of this term. But of course, that's just my opinion, and we'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
All right. This is a fascinating election, which, as I keep saying, not just the Americans, but the entire world is watching very closely. On that note, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with WION.
Thank you.